Yes, sir. Yes,
All
sir.
right, and he's going to be joining us today for our discussion. And so now's a great time to make sure everybody knows that it's time for Urshel Speaks this morning. We got a lot to talk about, so let's get to it. We're going to start out with Urshel's words of wisdom for today, and then we're going to get into our discussion. And in our second segment, also going to have a guest that's going to be calling in. Christopher Betts, another veteran IT professional, someone that it's good to get his opinion on some things. So for our words of wisdom today, I got a question for all of you listeners out there, and those of you watching on Facebook Live. And the question is, who do you think you are? Seriously, who in the heck do you think you are? And now, take some time after this broadcast and maybe think about that. Or again, go online and talk to me about it, who you think you are. And here's why I asked that question. Because it's important. It's important who you think you are. It's important to really put some thought into what you believe about yourself. Because a lot of people deal with a lot of challenges, suffer a lot of pain simply because of what they think about themselves. And oftentimes, what they think about themselves is not so much what they want to believe, but what's been communicated to them. Sometimes there's things in childhood. Sometimes there's things about how you've been raised, and different things that that we're confronted with that impact our thoughts, our belief about ourselves. And there's a great book, and there's some other great sources that talk about this very subject. But what you think about yourself is actually what you'll become. You have a creative power in the development of who you are, and it's expressed every day, but not always or not often just in words. People will say whatever they feel like needs to be said in a particular circumstance, or whatever they feel like the crowd needs to hear, or what's acceptable. But the self-talk that happens inside every single one of us has the power to move us towards the destination that's already been planted inside our head. And so it doesn't matter. I think it was Henry Ford that said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. But it goes beyond that. I believe that thoughts are things, and they have a creative power. They have the ability to shape shape the outside based on what's on the inside. So all of us need to take some time to think about who we are, and maybe even who we want to be, and who we feel like we're supposed to be, instead of just accepting whatever dialogue that may be going on and living by default. Being very purposeful in the fact that I think this is who I am. And as a result of that, that's probably who we'll become. So that's our words of wisdom for today. Who do you think you are? Jump on in and start having that conversation inside. And if you need help becoming that better person, let us know, because we're all about helping you do that. All right. Well, what do you think about that, Donald? That's one of the things we used to do. Words of wisdom for today. Just want to make sure that we're not just pumping that mental cotton candy into people's lives,
Yeah.
and that we've got some substance. So, what do you got? Anything you want to share about that?
Uh, no, I think you hit it on the head there. Maybe one thing you could do in the morning is probably just spend some time meditating about who you are, and what your life is all about. Don't try to be somebody you're not.
Yeah, yeah. I had a interesting evolution when I got out of the Marine Corps. So I was in the Marine Corps for 13 years, and that's kind of that period where you're over the hump. Typically, a career for retirement starts at 20 years, and some people can go a lot longer than that. But usually after 8-9 years, person gets over that 10-year hump. And so the assumption is, obviously, you're going to stay in for 20 years and retire. And and so there was some concern when I made the decision to transition out, for me and my family. And I didn't, sometimes people are like, I can't wait to get out, and they have this, what we call them, short time calendars, and they're counting down the days. And I loved it. I loved being in the Marine Corps. My career was good. It was good for me. I just transitioned out to do something that I enjoyed even more. And the interesting thing was I had a senior person that had a little bit more rank than I did, and he was really pissed that I was leaving the Marine Corps, like I was betraying our beloved Corps by moving on with my life. And so he started, like wailing on me. He started saying some things that weren't true. And so I went to his office and said, "Hey, we got to talk about this because this isn't good." And then he proceeded to tell me, well, listen, you should stay in. I've been in for 26, 27 years, and they're forcing me out next year. I told him I'd even go overseas. I want to stay in. And I said to him this. I said, there's the difference between you and I is, I've got the opportunity to stay. They've even offered me a bonus to stay, and you don't have the option to stay. And I think here's the problem. I think this is what's challenging you, is that we say something in the Marine Corps that sounds really, really good. We say being a Marine is not what I do, it's who I am, right? And then we joke and we say, in the Army, you're a soldier. In the Navy, you're a sailor. In the Air Force, you're an airman. But in the Marines, you're a Marine.
Right.
This is who we are. And so we've got these great, and I love it. And I love it, except for this. I said, the problem that I think you have is that when you take off your uniform and when you're no longer doing Marine every day. Now, we're always a Marine. That's what we believe. But when you're no longer doing every day Marine Corps, you're struggling to figure out who you're going to be. It's the gospel according to Rafiki from Lion King, right?
Right.
You don't know who you are.
Man, you went old school on that one, man.
And so
that's the first Lion King.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, I think that your challenge is you're worried about your identity the day that you're no longer doing Marine Corps every day. And I told him, I said, I have a lot of confidence in who I am and why I was created in my existence. And so for anything, if you want to get the maximum benefit out of it, you go to the user's manual, you read it, you see, who made it, what was their intention, how is it supposed to work, and how do I get the most out of this and make sure that it works the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah, but most men throw the instructions away,
Exactly.
I got it.
Exactly. Until it's not working.
Right.
And so I said, so if it's not working for you, I suggest you try to figure out, who has the owner's manual for your life. And, maybe go do some research, go do some reading, and figure out what the next part of your life is supposed to be, because you don't stop living because you stop putting on this uniform, or you change jobs, or any of the things that life can bring that changes, the circumstances of what you do when you get up every day.
Yeah, it's turning on and turning off. It's kind of like, obviously when you're a Marine and you're doing Marine things, you have to be a Marine at that moment. But, you're also a husband, and so you got to be a husband when you're supposed to be a husband. So it's turn on, turn off, and I think we just have a problem sometimes of adjusting. And it's something, I think it's a skill that you have to develop. So going back to that owner's manual to figure out that development,
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Donald, let's get to know you a little bit. And first of all, thank you for getting up on an early Tuesday morning.
It's a wet morning, man.
And navigating some of the not only traffic but construction.
Oh man, Frisco, what's happening up here, man?
The ever-growing, ever-changing Frisco, man. I'm sweating in here today.
I know, man. Y'all try to compete with Plano or what, man? This place is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and so thanks for coming out, and tell us a little bit about yourself. Now, you're originally from Louisiana, is that correct?
Yeah, so I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, just stone's throw over the state line. 1983, March 17th. So I got a birthday coming up.
Nice.
Be 36, believe it or not, man.
36.
Yeah.
36. So. I remember that vaguely.
Come on now, Urshel, you're only about what, 25, right?
I'm only about 25. I'm only about 25 times 2. I turned 49
that's
in
right.
January.
That's right.
Yep. So my 24-year-old daughter would be flattered to know that. But yeah. So from Shreveport, Louisiana, and so what do you do?
So Shreveport. My father was also a Lutheran minister. I'm a Lutheran minister here in Plano, Texas,
Awesome.
Messiah Lutheran Church, and My dad had his first call in Shreveport, and then we moved to New Orleans when I was about 4. And so I grew up in New Orleans pretty much. And then in about 1995, moved to Houston. My dad took his last call there, and he was there for 20 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he actually passed away a few years ago, so kind of miss my dad. But I know my mom's probably listening now, so just
Hey,
give a
Mom.
shout out to her. Yeah, hey mom, how you doing? So and my brother too. But yeah, so and then I moved here 7 years ago.
Okay.
Went to Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne and graduated there in 2012 and got my MDiv. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's just kind of a quick bio.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, great. Well, tell us a little bit about your church and where it is, and so people know how to find you. I'll be sharing all your social media on our page
Great.
afterwards.
Yeah, no, we're located on West Plano Parkway, 1801 West Plano Parkway, just right there by the Hope Center, which is off Custer Road.
Okay.
And so, I mean, literally get off of George Bush, and we're pretty much right there. So it's not too hard to find. It's a pretty big size building, so you should be able to find it. And
Okay.
got a neon sign out front. So salvation is here.
There you go. Beep, beep.
Right.
Awesome. Well, that's cool, man. So we met. I guess it's been maybe 2
weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, and
I just got done with working out and grabbing some lunch, and you popped up, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" But no.
Why is he trying to get me to eat these peppers?
Right. I was like, "What's up with this, man?" I make my own peppers now. But no, we just had a great conversation talking about faith and life in general.
Yeah.
And I think we both just have a mindset about who we are, like you were talking about earlier, and not trying to jump on bandwagons and but think for ourselves. So that's something I try to work with in my own life is my own wisdom is listening to other people, but also forming my own opinions around the facts that have been given to me. So
yeah.
Now, with being a pastor, obviously Scripture is my basis for my faith, and so I pretty much don't argue with Jesus, when it comes to Scripture. He's got the sole authority.
Yeah.
So, but I think in the way we carry out our daily lives and being a pastor and how I preach and teach, that's the how does it come across,
Right.
versus because sometimes when you read, you don't understand as much as if it's sort of preached to you and you can listen, and hearing is the organ of the soul.
Right.
It's how we internalize things, and we inwardly digest things through hearing. So
Right.
I think that's why sometimes you should probably read out loud.
Yeah.
You should probably remember it better. So
I think it does have an impact, and one of the things that I find interesting, and we can take this and we can segment it. I think in Western thought, we're pretty good at compartmentalizing the different parts of our life, and it's kind of like, some people eat, they don't like their food to touch on the plate, right? And so it's very segregated,
Right.
the way that they eat, and I can't have this touching that. And then, some people mix it all together. I think we're kind of more that compartmentalized, segmented. Yeah. And so the areas of our career, don't necessarily touch our belief systems and things like that. And all of these things are separate when really we're kind of just one person. And everything does touch. But one of the things that I really enjoy, and I think was great about that kind of organic conversation that we had just meeting, is that it's great, and it's actually okay to question not just what's going on externally, but to question what you think and what you believe. And for the same reason that I think a scientist, when they have an idea,
mm-hmm.
right, and then that idea moves eventually to a theory,
right,
and then their hopes, I would assume, is to see that theory become a scientific law,
right,
and for that to happen, what their strategy is to do everything they can to prove it wrong, and by trying to prove it wrong, if it can't be, then they have what could be the makings of a new scientific law.
Yeah.
And but I think that a lot of times there's really a fear in questioning the things that we've already accepted, the things that we've already believed, and the way that we think. I know you mentioned you've traveled a lot in your life and been outside of the country.
Yeah.
And boy, that's great for challenging
Yeah.
how you think and how you feel. What have you experienced?
Oh man, yeah. That's one thing too. I try to encourage, especially even the younger kids in my congregation that I'm there is, if you have the opportunity to travel, because when you see you as an American in someone else's eyes, it sort of changes your perspective about who you are.
Right.
Going back to what you were saying earlier, and so not that it's a good or a bad thing, but it opens your mind to understand things, and so. I remember I went to Latvia I think it was right before the second year of my seminary study, and I just took a class over there with a professor and a few friends of mine, and that country has been through a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, they were Soviet Union, and then even German, the Nazis were there at a time, but what I thought was interesting over there, talking about the Nazis, was like they have a different perspective on the Nazis because the German heritage and the Latvian heritage was so almost intertwined. I mean, they had history together, and so they have sort of a different view on World War II than us here in the West.
Right.
And so it was interesting to see that because when the Nazis came in, they were actually pretty kind
Mm-hmm.
to the
Wow.
Latvians, where when the Russians came in, they were ruthless.
Wow.
So that's why for me one of my passions is studying history. Just read.
Right.
I think there's a problem today with people just not reading.
Right.
We get all our news from whether it be CNN, Fox News, whatever. But why don't you just pick up a book, man, and read and again inwardly digest it for yourself.
Yeah.
And inform your own opinion.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that we have now that maybe we didn't have or didn't exist in the past, and that's the ability to have a curated news source that meets exactly what we already believe and what we want. Hey, Mark, did we already move past the commercial break?
We're still going?
Are we keep rocking?
Waiting on you.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and take a little bit of break. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
We'll keep
to
talking,
the clock.
man.
Yeah. And then we'll come back, and we've got someone that's going to be joining us. And this is a good time to share with everyone out there. We've got a great discussion coming up next in the second and third segments. We'll see you at Urshel Speaks right after the break.
This is Johnny B from my team at Dodge City of McKinney, located at 700 South Central in McKinney. Come in and see the Motor Trend Truck of the Year, the 2019 Ram 1500.
All right, what's up, Chris?
Great selection of Ram 2500s.
Hello, buddy. How you doing?
Good, man.
Hey, Chris, how you doing, man?
Good.
All right. Oh, there's my daughter. She's on the watch party. And all right. So, hey, Chris, this is Donald. And he's I don't know if you've been listening already, but we're going to jump into this represent.us. If you got anything you want to share about what we were already talking about.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Chris.
I listened a little bit.
Okay,
Nice
cool.
to meet you too, Donald.
Donald and I met recently at one of my favorite watering holes.
Yeah, he kept trying to give me these peppers, man. I'm like, come on, dude. Nah.
Be careful with Urshel. I'll try to get you to do lots of stuff.
Yeah, right. So, but no, it's good to have you too, man. To have a third party here, so.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll see if Urshel can get me to get online early, get this early again sometime. So.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I've been known at times to not plan too far ahead.
Yeah, I got that text, and I'm like, yeah, let me see if I can work it out. And so I was able to get here. I get up early anyway, so it's I was able to make it. It's just a wet morning, that's all.
Yeah,
I just decided to stay home for the first part of the day so I could do this. So I wasn't like in the car with Urshel or whatever. So
part of the reason why the last minute changes, I had scheduled an attorney. Actually, he's a Marine as well, and he's got a law firm, and he's developing all this technology for the automation of law firms. And he's scheduled to be on, but it's next week. And I just kind of got my weeks mixed up because things have been crazy. So I was posting yesterday, Zach Herbert's going to be on tomorrow. And then I texted him so he could post. And he was like, tomorrow? And I looked up our feed, and it was, next week. So.
Oh, my bad. Let me get back to
I was gonna say I wasn't your first choice. I'm offended.
Right. You were my first choice.
Yeah,
for
what's
this
going on,
show.
Urshel? What's up, man?
You guys
chop liver over here, man. I feel like one of your jalapenos, man.
There
your
we
peppers.
go. Yeah, just the good thing is I'm always willing to share them.
That's right.
So,
that's cool.
All right. When we got a lot of people that are joining on the Facebook Live. Yeah, it's also good that you couldn't do it because I ended up leaving my adapter so that I could plug you in live. So, all right. Let me go respond to some comments and guys, well, I'll take some questions online too, if people have things that they want to say and we can answer them. And Chris, are you good to stay with us through the end of the show, or are you just good for one segment?
Probably just one segment. I gotta get up and go to work before they hang me.
Okay. Well, let's not do that. That's.
Are you in bed right now, Chris?
Just only. No, I'm in my office right now.
I'm cool.
Hanging out on my computer. So.
Nice.
Awesome. Are you still out by the airport?
That's what I'm working at, but I work an hour north of I live an hour north of the airport, so.
DFW or?
Yeah, DFW Airport. But I live in Aubrey. It's up by Prosper, if you know where that's at.
Yeah, I know where Prosper's at.
Yeah, so it's a nice little drive in the morning. So.
A little bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mark's going to be telling us here in a minute or two when it's time for us to jump back on.
Yeah, 1 minute.
1 minute. That's all right. So I'm just going to introduce the represent.us and, how I stumbled across it. And then let's just we'll just riff a little bit and talk about it. And again, Chris, man, I appreciate you calling in and helping to move this conversation along.
Yeah, definitely.
Of course.
You have to get both of you guys back on, and then we'll do some thinking for a change stuff as well.
It's gonna be a new one for me, so we'll try to see how it goes.
Yeah, that'd be good.
The whole thinking part, that's gonna be new.
All right, yeah. Gotta have my Fruit Loops in the morning if I do all that.
Yeah, well, don't let the smoke pop out.
That's Those old Looney Tune commercials.
And don't forget sound upgrades for your ride. See Audio Depot, 4312 Matlock Road, just off I-20, Arlington.
All right. Well, welcome back. Thanks for hanging out with us a little bit this morning. And I wanted to bring up a topic and something that I saw maybe a week or so, or maybe just a few days ago on Facebook. And I took a look at it. And if nothing else, I was really interested in what I saw. So for those of you, and you're probably watching us on Facebook right now. If you're not, just listening on kvgiradio.com or on the KVGI Facebook page. So make sure that you bookmark that and check us out every Tuesday morning from 8 to 9. But what I saw on Facebook was it was a little video, and there was an actress in it, and she did this video with another guy, and it was called Represent.us. And I know the three of us have all. Chris, you've watched the video, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I watched it last night when you sent it to me.
Okay. And by the way, we have Chris Betts that's on the phone. He's called in. And,
don't forget to introduce him.
Yeah. And those of you, if you don't know Chris Betts, is someone that you probably should go ahead and find him on Facebook and connect with him. I believe he's the tell me if I get the title wrong, but are you the president of the Denton County Young Republicans? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So do we call you Mr. President? We play Hail the Chief? How does that work?
Just try not to throw stuff at me.
Awesome.
You got some tomatoes in here?
But I love it. I love to see people actively engaged with their passion, and doing things and not just being the passive complainers that is almost like a sport that we see in our country. People that have all the commentary. I mean, most of my conversations, I solve all the world's problems, right? And just because I've got all the answers in my mind, but it's people like Chris who actually are willing to take their time and effort, people like you, Donald, that are doing something based on what you believe to make a difference and to have an impact. So I appreciate that about both you gentlemen. And but so I watched the Represent.us video I looked a little bit into the website, not as exhaustively as I would like to, but I was very interested in the conversation. So, Chris, let's start out since you're calling in. Tell me what your initial thoughts were. Is this something that you had seen before, or that you may have seen it since it started?
I've seen it before, and I kind of brushed it off just because I assumed it was the actress. I was like, well, this isn't something that I'm going to agree with. And then I actually went through and watched it all when you sent it to me, and I watched the whole thing so I can make sure I wasn't, just ignorant on the situation. And I agree with some of the things they were talking about. I agree if there's issues. I agree if there's some things that are broken. I don't necessarily agree with their answers, all of them, but I think that they're onto something. I think that that is their side, that is her and their team's push to be bipartisan to answer for everyone.
Yeah, awesome. Donald, what were your thoughts when you looked at it?
No, I mean, I kind of agree with Chris on that. Is whenever you watch something, especially something that's been well done like that,
right?
I'm always thinking in the back of my head, what is this really, for? Know, so
what's the agenda?
Yeah, it's almost like there's always something behind something,
right.
know. And so on that, I really agree with Chris. Are they pushing something, or what is it going on? But I do agree with some of what they had to say on the video, just about sort of our government and maybe some of the things that are wrong, that should be fixed,
right?
But am I, And while I was watching the video, I was like, I wish we had, like Chris, more younger people really stepping up instead of voting, actually running for office,
right.
And making a stand, So I think if we had more younger people in Congress, and whether they're Democrat, Republican, I just feel more comfortable with who I would vote for.
Right. Right.
So.
Yeah, and so my impressions again too. To me, it was intriguing. It was interesting. Obviously, like you say, it was well produced. And I know a lot of us, especially when we see, like you mentioned, Chris. First of all, it's an actress. It's an actor. It's extremely well produced. And so, so who's behind this? What's the message behind the message? And so and again, addressing problems. Here's what I did like. I don't think that that probably a lot of people have arguments with the fact that there are some broken things in our government, and in the way that things are done, and maybe even some stagnation. And I think it's an Indian proverb that I've seen floating around, and most people that are listening know that I kind of have an allergy to cliches, so I don't use them much. But I thought it was pretty interesting when I read someone that said that the left wing and the right wing are part of the same bird, right? And so we have challenges with what we have. I'm definitely not afraid of more thought and a different approach and a fresh approach to how we approach some of these things. But Chris, what were your thoughts? Not so much on the particular strategies, but what were your thoughts on the problems that they were identifying and the approach of going after it on the local level? What were your thoughts about that?
That's being as much as involved in politics as I am. It makes total sense, because you can go vote for somebody for Congress, and they're never going to change anything in your life for the next 10 years. But you can go vote for a school board member or a city council member, and that's going to change about 70% of your life tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the thing, is people don't ever want to just kind of go and be honest and get out in the local things, because they're not as, quote unquote sexy to get in those races. But everything that they're talking about is all spot on with, get local first, and that's how you get louder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with Chris. People don't realize, the local level is where a lot of things happen. And, when you go to the ballots, voting for a general election, pretty much, I bet 90% of the people in our country only know maybe the first quarter of that ballot. Where you get to the railroad commissioner, like, I don't know what that is, and you vote off. Well, that guy's got a lot of power.
Right.
He can do a lot of things, and if you don't know who you're voting for,
right,
and this, well, then you only have yourself to blame.
Right,
I think,
and
so.
Yeah, and like Chris says, and a lot of power that impacts you, like starting next month, right, and has a real impact in
huge,
your life,
big time.
And one of the things, so I went on and I started looking, I reposted it and, made a joke about, got me feeling all Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which probably neither one of you two gentlemen I've ever seen.
I've seen that. I've seen that movie.
And I like some of those old movies, and but I did like the thought of dealing with issues like gerrymandering, and which is a big issue, and I think that's an issue on both sides of the aisle. But here's some of it, where it starts to get controversial. And I'm going to just throw some of this out here because we're all agreeing too much, and that doesn't make for good ratings. I think we're supposed to argue and insult.
We can do that.
And not really on this show.
No.
But some of the things that I thought were interesting that I'd like to hear your thoughts on is, even the approach that when it comes to campaign finance, which we know is a huge issue. But what are your thoughts on this idea of every person having like $100 voucher, and then based on that voucher, those local politicians can't raise any other money outside of the constituents and the people that they represent. What did you think about that, Chris? I know you've been involved in some campaigns.
I think they're talking about a voucher with if it was like your own money, that's one thing. But if they're talking about like tax money going to vouchers, that's a little. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I didn't really get into. Maybe I missed that part. But the bigger thing with that is, that's some people put their money where their passions are. If there's something that's a pro-life issue, I'm going to put more money towards that than I'm going to put towards toll road reform, like that, if I donate or when I donate. And people typically donate if they're really, really passionate about something. I think what they're getting at is they don't like the corporate lobbyists, and they're trying to get away from the corporate buyouts and the things, because you can go get, regardless of what side you're on, if it's Planned Parenthood or the NRA, they're going to donate to their campaign person of choice. And you kind of have to be and they're careful about that stuff. And that makes me weary as well. But I think that the voucher thing, putting a limit or putting a mandate on something like that, it's not really. I don't think that's necessarily going to equalize or help the situation. I think what needs to help the situation is the ability to be flexible in the races, and putting a limitation on the money isn't going to change everything, because they're saying that people are hard to get a hold of and hard to reach. I think it's mostly just because whenever they come out, those people come out in public, congressmen or whatever, typically people come to them and they just yell at them, because they're mad about something. They never give them kudos. So they kind of get hard to reach because they're human too. But whenever I need to reach out to my congressman or a congressman in neighboring counties, I have no issue going and reaching out to them, because I'm bringing concerns. Hey, look, I don't like that you push for this bill, or maybe we should do this instead. And they're usually pretty willing and able to talk. And if they disagree, they explain why. They've been pretty human with me ever since.
Dude, that's pretty spot on. Yeah. It's always like, because we're of a party and I hate this party or that party, and so the moment we see somebody from that party, we have anger, it feels like sometimes, instead of just respecting this person as a human being and letting them voice what they need to voice, and then also making sure that you can voice your opinion as well. And it just, people don't talk to each other anymore, I think. It's just we'd rather scream at each other on Twitter. But if we come face to face, we don't scream. It's like we hide, or we're really mad, and then we scream, and then it doesn't look good, And that's what you see today. Again, Chris makes a good point. Geez, man, just turn on the news. Everybody's yelling at each other. You know? So.
Yeah, and so let me throw this in there, just a little future self-promotion. So I have this idea of a book that I should have written about 20 years ago.
Oh, I see where this is going.
So coming soon.
He suckered us in, Chris.
Coming soon to an Amazon download near you. And so there's this concept, and both of you guys are smart. You're into history, and so tell me your thoughts on this before I put a lot of effort and energy into getting this book published. But here's the concept: when kings went to war. And so the concept is simply this. Back during feudal times, if I was a king and you were a king, and Chris, you were a king, and we were neighboring kingdoms, and let's say that I decided to declare war on your kingdom. And it doesn't matter whether it was declaring war over water, whether it was land, or whether it was a woman, right? It doesn't matter why I declared war, but the first horse out of the gate was my horse. The horses behind me were my sons, right? Mm-hmm. And so I have a real vested interest in whether I win this war or not, because my name could be wiped off the earth. Yeah. And I could, disappear from history. because I'm going to war against you. And I'm, the first person that, could catch a spear or an arrow. And so here's the concept. I'm not saying that Donald Trump or, Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or the president, should be, driving a tank in Syria right now.
Right.
But here's what I am saying. When we talk about a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, when we have, major legislation on health care or retirement benefits or, all of these major tax reform, all of these things that the politicians who are legislating these things don't deal with the same things that we deal with. Their healthcare system is not our healthcare system. Mm-hmm. And so, that's one of my thoughts is how do we get away from it? Because it's almost like we have created a ruling class. And, one of the things off the bat that, they talked about a democracy, well, we're a constitutional republic. And so there are some differences. And I don't particularly think that the majority is right about very many things. Mm-hmm. Right. And, I used to talk about that when I was in the finance arena. Yeah. The majority of people don't do what's right. That's why we have, a lot of people doing something and they're one percenters. But this concept of kings going to war and the legislators, the ruling class that we have, really having to experience life like we do. What are your thoughts about that? Am I missing it there?
No, I mean, I think that's how it should be. I mean, I'm a big believer in the idea that of governmental median income. So so you can have them be more relatable. That's why Texas has a part-time legislature. So that way they have to go back to work and work a job like the rest of us, like you and me. And I think that's a big thing. I think that's important. But I think another thing that should be pushed forward is median income for elected officials. So say the mayor of Plano, he can only make the median income of the people in his area that he equals to. So, and that helps out because there's going to be more people that aren't millionaires than there are. So they're going to be more incentivized to make their middle class richer and bigger and get rid of the lower class, because the lower class numbers of the poor people, the impoverished people, are going to kind of diminish that number even farther than a rich number would. You'll get like 1 or 2 millionaires and you'll have 20 impoverished people and 50 middle class people, and you should kind of center out that line to where it's the median income, so that way they are personally incentivized to go ahead and grow their area as much as possible. I think that a big thing too is that, like you're saying, they don't live the same thing. I think that with ACA, it was a noble notion, and they just wanted to help people. That's kind of what they were looking for. It got implemented very poorly, but from the get-go, when the bill was signed, it was set up so Congress didn't have to sit there and use that health care. They got to use their own special health care. They didn't have to worry about it. Right. I think that's some of the bad things that go on, is that they've created themselves to be a special class, and that's it's on both sides of the aisle. It doesn't matter what party you are. They've all pushed together behind closed doors to make sure they were the special ones, they're a special class, and that they get different things than we do. And I think that that's really, really unfortunate. And I think that people are getting more fed up. I think that that's what millennials and Generation Z, once they get more in the political field, are going to start pushing for, is more of the equilibrium within our Congress and within our leadership. Yeah, I think that's something that's going to resonate very, very much so, because there's things that millennials are more conservative on, they're more liberal on, and same with Generation Z. But I think what everybody aligns is they want actual equality, equal standards, equal starting points, not necessarily equal outcomes. And so but when you go into Congress, you walk into $175,000 a year, everything's paid for, free flights. I can't work with that. I got to fly out to Richmond, Virginia, and I'm like, all right, let's get some ramen noodles this week. We'll be good. Right. So,
what's in my fridge today?
Guys.
Yeah, that. Thank you, Chris, because I think that's some very valuable input, because when we look at this approach that we have currently, and people, again, that are legislating, that aren't touched by the same things, and the impact that it has, but even more so, you have people that aren't in touch with their constituency, right? The people that they are supposed to represent the most, and I absolutely agree with this concept of public servitude, right?
Yeah.
And we're serving the public, not that we're just leading based on whatever things that are, and again, going to get us reelected. A lot of people like to jump up and down, and term limits is a big thing. Yeah. Maybe not. That's not the hill that particularly I choose to die on, because I really want to see people in leadership that are leading, that are servants, that are genuine. Because, I mean, Chris, you know more politicians than I do. I know a lot of local ones. I spent a few hours with the mayor of Plano in our first conversation. And, man, I learned a lot. First of all, like, you talk about the median income. Well, I don't even know if you know this, Chris. The mayor of Plano, this guy doesn't get a paycheck for being the mayor of Plano. I was blown away. It's the fourth largest city in North Texas.
Yep.
And he says, I have two jobs. One's being the mayor of Plano. That's about 40 hours a week. And one is a financial advisor. And that's about 50 hours a week.
Yeah.
And one pays me and one doesn't.
Yeah.
And, so right there, my level of respect just for that office, take the person out of it, take the politics out of it. Just the fact that you would want to do that, whether you have future aspirations or not.
Right.
It takes a lot to commit that much time and work into something that financially you're not being compensated for. I would believe, at least at some point, you kind of have to care.
Yeah.
Right.
No, this is interesting because I think it was Martin Luther that quoted a noble prince who can find,
Yeah.
It's like, as we're talking, it's almost as if, the higher up the ladder you go in politics, right? How do you resist temptation? Because eventually, the animal is going to come.
Power corrupts, absolutely. Power corrupts, absolutely.
It's maybe not so much the money, but it's the power. And I think it takes a very strong person to be able to balance power.
Yeah.
And you're talking about kings ruling the world. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read Machiavelli, but he, so it's like and somebody. That's the thing. Somebody's got to police the world,
Right.
Otherwise, the world will get out of hand. But the problem is like we're saying, people, man, when people care about other people and they put themselves, like the mayor of Plano, in a service position, that's huge.
Yeah.
Because that way I know when that guy speaks, hey, this guy's doing it for my benefit. Like he's actually
at least what he thinks.
Right.
Is
at least
the
what
best.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so I can much better talk to him than I would, somebody on the Senate floor, where he don't know me from Adam.
Right.
So.
Right. I've said in the past, and I don't know if I heard someone say this or if I made it up, so I'll just take credit, is, that the Statue of Liberty on the right coast over here should be balanced on the left coast by a statue of responsibility, right? Because you can't have one without the other. And so when we talk about some of these things, like our, government shutdown, that we had, and when I was in the military, there was several times there was a threat of the government shutdown. We might not get paid, and and so Chris also served in the military, so you know what that feels like when you think, and I had a family in the military. Well, what if I don't get a paycheck? And it never happened. But even the way that our recent one happened, my attitude about that is, okay, I get it. Sometimes you get to an impasse. Sometimes it's a challenge, and we can't come to an agreement. But maybe, and now, Chris, tell me about getting this policy through, because I think I want to push for this one. All right.
We're writing the bill right now, Chris. We just need you to sign off on it.
Yeah. So maybe, Chris, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, all right. Make sure you not go to work. So here was my thought. Okay, I get it. Sometimes we're going to get stuck, and then there's a shutdown, right? But here's the way I see it. Instead of just saying, a lot of people said, well, you know what, the politicians are still getting paid, and and they're still flying on planes and all of these things. Well, I think we take it a step further and say, not to say that the politicians don't get paid, but how about the politicians, the ruling class? And I'm saying this in way of an incentive. What if they had to personally, out of their own pockets, their own family coffers, pay the salaries, excuse me, of all those government workers that who are still having to come to work, who are missing their money? What if they had to dig into their own fortunes, right, and say, okay, well, since we can't come to an agreement and we're responsible for it, we're now financially responsible. There's an automatic suit that takes place that pulls money out of our retirement accounts, that pulls money out of our kids' college funds, that pulls money out of all the places where we have money. Maybe we automatically have a second or third mortgage taken out on our home that starts paying salaries of people who aren't responsible for this decision, but they feel the consequences of it.
Yeah, government might not shut down, you know.
When do you think the next shutdown would be if there was something like that in place?
And yeah, I mean, I think that there should be some form of, like, not necessarily, like, I don't want to use the word punishment, but I mean, whatever, we'll use it. We'll use the word punishment. Some sort of punishment for if they can't get their job done.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's what that really is. Like, you're there to get the job done. You're there to govern and legislate for the people. And when the shutdowns happen, like, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, like, I mean, I think that it shows a total failure of why you were elected to that seat, because the American people are not so divided to where we want the government to shut down. I mean, everyday Americans like you guys and me, like, we're not going to a government shutdown's not going to hurt us. It's not going to affect us in any way. It'll hurt the Coast Guard because they're not under the bill that pays military, because they want to play around with being DHS or not some days. But we have to kind of look at this thing of, like, if we're going to do a shutdown, there needs to be some sort of penalty, like I said, because we're not so divided. And the bigger problem with that is, I think that I don't know how you really make a good penalty for it. I don't know how you make an equal penalty for it, because the people who are going to choose those rules are the people that are in those seats.
Right.
You know, so I don't know how you do that. I think that there should be something. I think that maybe if there was doing a fee or a fine, something like that, where they have to pay for that. There's a lot of government employees, but I think that if there were so many government shutdowns in somebody's tenure, then their retirement benefits are knocked down by a certain percentage. Like, because they get, after they serve 2 terms, they got retirement benefits for life. Maybe their retirement benefits come at risk, and that stops the big bureaucracy part of everything. That stops the big entitlements. I don't know. I mean, I think that there should be something done there, 100%. Because I think that we have bigger things to worry about and bigger fish to fry than who shut down what. I think that almost the worst part of that is that they panic about optics with that. You know, we saw the left versus right slinging going on a lot more during the shutdown, and everybody hated each other. So they're, no, it's Trump's fault. No, it's Nancy Pelosi's fault. And they just went after each other like it, you know. But really, it's everyone's fault. Like, they all were at fault because they all didn't come to the table. You know, and regardless which side you agree with, like, I mean, the American people were like, okay, cool. Like, I mean, at the airport, we did food drives, we did stuff to help people out. Like, it was just one of those situations where the everyday people just felt bad for the people who weren't getting paid, and those people still had to work. I mean, there was a mandate that TSA employees still had to go to work without pay. They couldn't take sick time. People were suffering under that, and it wasn't fair to them. And they're just trying to live their lives. And if they didn't want anything, they didn't care about the wall necessarily. They didn't care about this or that. They just wanted to go home, feed their family, and just live their life to the best.
Yeah, 100%. And so that's, you know, where really, you know, and even we get a little bit back towards the represent us, you know, that's where I think the conversation, where I feel like there's an important part of the conversation, is that we cannot separate the politics and the issues, no matter, you know, again, we've all got our curated news. We've got the things that I think I posted on Instagram, you know, a while back. You know, a lot of people use news and information like a drunk uses a light post, right? Not for illumination, but just for support, right? And so it's really about reinforcing what I believe. But at the end of the day, you know, a family that can't pay their bills or their mortgage is a family that can't pay their bills or their mortgage, regardless, as Chris said, of what their particular politics is. And then to feel like, you know, not only are you're not even a pawn in the game, you know, you're not really a factor. You know, you're a statistic on a chart, and that is, you know, expendable, and so we have to get away from that. And, you know, even the name of this website, again, that, you know, I'm not yet either for or against, but I love the idea of simply this: let's try something a little different.
Yeah.
Let's touch this from a different perspective, and let's try to move the needle in the conversation, because if there's a stalemate, you know, we've got to do something that makes us better. And I feel like that's our responsibility. You know, I'm the, you know, my oldest daughter, she's
Urshel for Congress.
What's that?
Urshel for Congress.
Yeah, definitely, man.
You know, my oldest daughter is listening now, and you know, heck, man, I want to make sure that children and grandchildren that have my name have the opportunity for it to be better, simply because I wouldn't let it stay like it was.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to see something different, and not that I just wanted to win. You know, even, you know, like we have this conversation or other conversations, the ability to function together and to move together is not based on agreement. It's based on respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on trust. I don't have to agree with everything that someone else says, but it makes a difference. When I have a conversation with Chris, it makes a difference to me that I know that he respects me individually, that we have a level of trust for one another, and that I know that no matter what, even if you and I don't agree, Donald, if I believe that you're doing what you believe is the right thing, I approach the conversation differently
mm-hmm.
than if I think that, you're against me.
Yeah.
I'm happy with you being for us,
yeah,
and having a difference of opinion.
No.
And that's how we move the conversation forward. But we don't have a lot of that in the conversations and debates, do we, Chris?
No, we don't. I mean, it's literally just people come out of the gate screaming at each other, and they're not very just talking like, this is my neighbor, this is my family, this is my friend. I mean, you see that all the time. You go to Thanksgiving, and there's like the pre-rules of don't talk about politics.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, it's 100%. It's people come in ready to attack instead of ready to understand. I mean, that's the hard part with all of us. That's human nature, right? You want to defend your idea. You don't want to hear anybody else's. I think that that's a humility thing. And I was at church Sunday. They had a big thing on pride and learning humility and making sure you're not a prideful person. I think that that really rang true with me because, as you know, Urshel, I can get very adamant about things that I believe, and I almost turn off my listening switch.
Yeah.
And then I hear somebody who's just in a different situation. I'm like, oh, like as soon as I open up my heart a little bit, I'm like, oh, well then how do we both fix this? How can we do this instead of my way's right, your way's wrong? And I think that's where Congress sits. I think that's where a lot of our elected officials sit, is like, if I don't go hard enough to the right, nobody's going to vote for me. If I don't go hard enough to the left, nobody's going to vote for me. And I need to be this war hawk on these issues.
Yeah.
And instead of being like, hey, look, so, Senator John Smith and Senator Jane Doe, like, so our people both agree with, ABC legislation. Like, how do we just work to get this done? Like, let's stop focusing on the hyperpartisan. Let's focus on like what's good for us, all of us, everybody together. And I think that's what's been forgotten.
Yeah, just to back up on Chris there too, is I think, people aren't commodities. We're living, breathing flesh.
Yeah.
And when you start messing with people's livelihoods and you don't care, I have a problem with that. And the government shutdown was what, 3 weeks to a month or something like that, I think.
I think about close to a month, maybe a little more.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just, there's a problem too today with people wanting to win an argument. That's not your objective. Your objective is to debate and to form your own opinion. Doesn't matter if the person agrees with you.
Right.
It's the fact that you yourself are able to form an opinion and speak intellectually about it.
Right.
Whether the guy agrees with you or lady agrees with you or not, that's not your objective.
Right.
Your objective is to speak intellectually and form an opinion and sound rational.
Right.
But look what we have today.
Yeah.
Man, we were talking earlier about the mayor of New York with meatless Mondays. I'm like, seriously, this is the hot topic.
Right.
We're gonna do plantless Saturdays. It's just let's have a real thing here.
Right.
I mean, I'm not gonna go off on New York. But I mean, it's just they have a lot more problems than meat in New York.
Right.
And thanks be to God that I live in Texas. I actually like the state.
That'll
really
never
a lot.
pass.
Yeah, exactly.
Never pass.
We love our meat, man. So, but to all the vegans out there, I don't,
respect.
Respect. Again, I'm not trying to win the argument for meat. So.
Right. Yeah, it's really important as we have these conversations. We talk about respect. We talk about listening. And Chris, thank you for saying that, because that is really a big part of the issue, is listening. And I've shared this story before, and I'll share it very quickly. On the way to Desert Shield, I left Okinawa on a ship, and we went to the Philippines, and we were there for 3 days. And one of the most impactful things that's ever happened to me happened. And I won't go into all the details, but bottom line is getting off of the ship and then getting off of the base in Olongapo, Philippines, not 300 yards from the gate of the base, there was a man with 2 young teenage daughters, and he was pimping his daughters to me and my friends. and the thousands of other service people that were there on whatever liberty they had.
Mm-hmm.
And it was devastating to me to see this man doing this very aggressively and, making us promises and guarantees. But when I was back on the ship that night and when I was laying in the rack, the thought that was haunting me is, what must life have to become for a man to think that this is a good idea with his daughters? And I wasn't in a judgmental state against him. What I was really questioning is, how bad would life have to be for me that I think that this is a good idea to offer my daughters up to hundreds of men
that's acceptable
a week so that I can eat, so that they can eat.
Right.
And in a way that, just like in an agrarian society, if I have more sons, I have more workers, and that allows me to create more wealth. He's looking at his daughter's body that way. What has happened? What is the progression? Because it could not have started that way.
Right.
But what is the progression of tragic things in life that happen that make this seem to be acceptable? And that forced me into a way of thinking, not just in that moment, but to begin to look at other people and other circumstances and try to understand why. Why do they think and feel this way? I see Chris's passion on the internet all the time. We've had some conversations. We haven't had a ton of political conversations, but, I follow him and the things that he's doing, and I'm proud of the effort as a young man that he puts into these things. And so, but there's, that passion is driven by some things that are inside of him. I think that applies to every human. And when we stop listening to what's going on on people, I mean, heck, there's a difference in opinion from the west side of Plano to the east side of Plano. But there's a reason why. And if we're not willing to look at the hows and the whys of where people are, then we can't pretend that we have the compassion to really want to do what's best for everyone. Because even if my idea is better for you than your idea for you, if I don't understand why you have that idea, if I don't understand why you don't trust, if I don't understand why, you feel like you have to have things this way, then I'm never going to be able to influence you, because you'll never believe that I really care about what you think.
Yeah, it's like the
Right.
story of the prince and the pauper. You
Yeah.
know, they switch places, and the prince sees his people through the pauper's eyes, and
Yeah.
then it changes him. And that's what we talked about earlier. Is when you see yourself through another country's eyes or some other culture's eyes, man, it changes your perspective on life a little bit, and you start to make sort of I think more rational decisions. Instead of just, I'm an American.
Yeah.
Well, you're a person first.
How about that?
Yeah, So anyway, I'll let Chris take it.
Hey, Chris, we got about a minute, 20 seconds left, man. I got a lot of people on here saying, man, we got people saying hashtag team bets. Yay, bets. Thanks for sharing. Shoot your final round here.
Funny looking guy.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, man, I really appreciate you coming on. What's just a final shot of something you'd like to share with the audience today?
No, I think that this is great because like all three of us here, we all have the same ideas. We all have different ideas, and I think it's the fact that we're coming together as a conversation. We're coming together to just talk about what's going to make tomorrow better. At the end of the day, that's what everybody's doing. Is everybody's coming with their ideas to make tomorrow a better place. Nobody's coming to attack and destroy, really. Nobody here on this plane, and so
Right.
I think that everything here is really awesome. I appreciate you for having me on, Urshel. It was nice meeting you too, Donald.
Yeah, Chris, nice meeting you, man.
I'm really excited.
Good conversation, man. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, and so, we're going to continue to do this. Chris, I've thought about having you on the show quite a bit. Well, again, I'll do it with a little advanced planning because, my intention is to be the right man at the right time, saying the right words to change the world. And for me to do that, I've got to be in conversations with the right people. And we've got to be provoking people to do and to think better so that we get different results. My name is Urshel. Donald, Chris, thank you. Thank you for joining us on Urshel Speaks. We'll see you next week. Tell somebody, because we're going to do it right. I'll talk to you soon. And that's when an hour goes by.
Awesome, man. That was